I want to say hello to everybody. It's so good to see you after all this time. And I'm thrilled that so many people are on here. On my screen, there's 2 full pages of you. And I don't know how many more I can't get on the screen, but welcome. It's just delightful to see all of you. I'm thrilled that everybody's here. And I want to give thanks to some of the people that helped put this together today, because as you all might suspect, we are not Zoom experts yet. I'm sure we will be in another hour. First of all, you all know Ellen Evans, who does our newsletters, and she's handling the Zoom process today. Janie Gonzalez, who is the board member at large, wrote the Zoom instructions and volunteered her staff as our technical assistants today. So that's Webhead Tech people that are helping us. And you, Margaret Bowman, helped us all using the San Antonio 100 website and sending out the notices, because I regret to say that in the off months, we all forgot how to use it. And Margaret didn't. And then finally, as mentioned, this is the very first of our programs. And we're so grateful that we have experienced speakers who fortunately are related to one of our longest term members, Mary Fisher, and therefore they can't criticize us too much. We're very grateful for that. And at this point, I want to turn the program over to Tori Carlton, our Vice President of Programs, so she can introduce her program committee and our speakers. Tori, take it on.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's just as you said, it's great to see everybody gather virtually. And I'd just like to thank the members of my program committee for forging on during the time of COVID. We have some great plans. I'll say that Jill is a new member of our program committee. She gave us great help in recent weeks, so thank you to Jill, but also thank you to Ann Krause, who has been able to juggle time in her work with Hemisphere in helping us, Mary Fisher, Barbara Hendricks, and Diana Bravo Gonzalez. And so I'm appreciative to have all of those great women around me helping. And so we are embarking on our first Zoom program with a very wonderful program, and delighted to be able to start our meeting with greetings from San Antonio, historic postcards of the Alamo City, presented by award-winning author and publisher Lewis F. Fisher. We actually have a double header today because Lewis's son, Bill Fisher, is joining today on the call to help as a moderator of the conversation. Many of you may remember Bill's wonderful SA100 presentation last year on Spanish language book publishing in San Antonio. Clearly, the interest in book publishing runs in this family. Today's program takes us on a journey back into time. At the dawn of the 20th century, just as color postcards were becoming a worldwide sensation, San Antonio bypassed Dallas as the largest city in Texas. Soon afterwards, idyllic postcard images of San Antonio began landing in mailboxes across the country, displaying our recently gained wealth and prosperity. Lewis Fisher's newest book, Greetings from San Antonio, is a collection of more than 600 of these wonderful black and white photo postcards. Many of them are quite rare and all tell a compelling visual narrative of our city during this pivotal period. I hope you're as excited as I am about taking this virtual trip. Just a few short notes about how the meeting will function in Zoom. All of us will be muted by Ellen Evans during the meeting, just so Lewis and Bill have a quiet space to present. We encourage you to ask questions at any time through the chat feature down below on the bottom toolbar. If you are new to Zoom, you can find the chat feature down on the bottom. Just wiggle your mouse and you'll see the chat. Bill will moderate your questions, monitor your questions in Zoom, in the Zoom chat area, and they will be responded to at the end of the program. Now, with those ground rules down, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Louis. Louis is a San Antonio author, historian, former journalist, and publisher, and husband of longtime SA100 member Mary Fisher. Among his many titles published under the Maverick Publishing label are American Venice, the epic story of San Antonio's river to Chile Queens, Wagons and Fandangos, the Spanish Plazas in frontier San Antonio. Lewis's latest book, Greetings from San Antonio, was published by Trinity University Press. As I said earlier, his presentations will showcase only a fraction of the 600 plus postcard images uniquely organized to form a visual profile of our colorful city during the first half of the 20th century. Today's program will take the form of an interview with his son, Bill. Bill is an attorney who loves to hold his father's feet to the fire, so this promises to be a very interesting interview session. Bill and Louis, let's get started. So Louis, you're going to share your screen.
Okay.
Yes.
See how this works.
There we go.
All right. Got it?
We're off.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tori, for such a fine introduction. I think you covered the subject very well and the pitfalls that we all have. Excuse me, just a second. I was getting feedback from Mary, who's watching in the next room, and I wanted to be sure the feedback I got was going to be what would keep me on track. I think Bill was voted as the one most likely to keep me on track. So he is going to ask questions and comment as this goes along. This is an unusual presentation in that it doesn't take postcards just as curiosities, as collectible items, but as visual images that give a history, a pictorial history of San Antonio during the first half of the 20th century, when postcards were most varied and most popular. There are some limitations, but within that, I think we can still get a pretty good idea of what the city was like. Just a couple of quick comments on the layout of the book itself. This is not your typical postcard book where you get two postcards on a page and it says, the captions say something like, gee, look at this old building, isn't this cute? But we tried to do some research and some interpretation of things. This is one page that has 4 postcards on it, but it kind of emphasizes those that are most visually interesting and has some comments to boot. At the top right, there is a postcard of the Kaler House on the campus of San Antonio College, and at the lower right is the Denman House, which stood on French Place. When that was torn down in the early 1970s, that house, that incident was the impetus for the formation of the Monte Vista Historic District. So we owe that house and its passing a lot, and we do note that in the book.
Dad,
Postcards can also be organized to tell stories, even though they came out at different times. The alligator gardens at the Whitty Museum, for instance, didn't just have alligators in them. For years, there were popular rattlesnake fries. As one postcard notes, every Sunday at 4 p.m., there was a snake fry. You have one guy in the postcard on the left preparing the fry, and at the top right, another scene slightly different. Looks like he's either an army guy or a park ranger, whatever, who's cooking on a grill. And at the lower right, you've got some delighted customers who are offered samples of the fried rattlesnake at the reptile gardens.
Before you go on, I've got a question about this.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you go back one?
Yes. That one?
Yeah. So I'm intrigued to hear your comments about the intended audiences for these postcards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the first page, you've got big fancy houses of San Antonio. Well, who was producing those cards and why? Was that the proud architect, developers, the builders, the owners?
Well,
this page, it makes much more sense. Tourists would buy these and say, oh, how quaint, and send it to friends outside San Antonio or outside Texas.
okay, this is an example of how postcards were intended to put San Antonio's best foot forward. The people, they were done for marketing purposes. The people most likely to buy postcards were targeted with images that were well photographed, well cropped, and most likely to appeal to others. Everyone seemed to always be interested in how the upper crust lived, and so pictures of grand houses were always much more featured than those of lesser homes. These homes were all built in the early 1900s. Very few postcards of the King William district, for instance, because by the time postcards came out, Victorian houses were passé. But these were done to sell to tourists, to the owners of the homes, obviously, and other people who were trying to promote the city. Whereas these were done to promote popular activities, just things that were everyday occurrences that seemed to be unusual to the area in which they were. In fact, one of these guys, I think the Whitty or someone, actually spent their full time going out around ranches in the hill country collecting rattlesnakes to come and fry at the weekly sales. Does that answer the question to some
Yes, thank you.
sufficiently?
Yes.
Okay, great. We're going to proceed just very quickly through the book, which is organized. I mean, what do? You got a couple thousand postcards. You're trying to tell a story. How do you winnow them down? How do you select them? The solution in this case was to organize them for someone who is coming to the city, who arrives, looks at the sites, settles in, goes to restaurants, goes to church, and then we've got a final section on the military, which is so important in San Antonio. So when you got to San Antonio, the first thing you had to do is figure out how to get around. This is one of our fine streetcars that ran in San Antonio until the mid-1930s, and some rather dapper attendants here on the screen.
I've got a question about this one.
Yes.
I see that we've got a comment from a participant who's saying, great to see early versions of transit in San Antonio. My question is whether this was public transit or privately owned transit. I can more or less make out the name on the front of this trolley as San Antonio Traction
San Antonio Traction Company. That
was
was predecessor of VIA.
So it was public transit.
It might have, sure, it had its own board of directors and everything, but it was run on city tracks. And as soon as the streetcar went out into a neighborhood, you very quickly had a lot of development going on. So the streetcars were very important in the growth of the city. And it's sort of like when you're going out in the country, and like in Castroville, you see the sewer lines, water lines being laid outside the city. You know, pretty quick you're going to see some subdivisions out there. Same thing here. When you started seeing some streetcar tracks going out into the country, you knew that you were going to be seeing some development. But this actually was done, of course, preceding buses, and was a really very, very efficient way to get around. We have postcards of your usual hotels, the St. Anthony, the Gunter, the Menger, and interior views, but we can't forget the Hot Wells area for resorts, for spas. This is actually a double postcard. This is a postcard that was mailed folded, and you unfolded it, and you got this fine view of this hotel, which was down on the south side, on the opposite side of the river from San Jose Mission. And attracted the likes of Teddy Roosevelt, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and a number of other elegant visitors to the city. Once the hotels were built and transportation progressed, you also had motor courts. This one was down near the Pearl, and you can't help wonder if you had a chance to stay in this instead of the Hotel Emma. This might be a bit more fun in some ways and get you back to earlier times. Once you got settled in, you wanted to get out and see what San Antonio had to offer. The typical starting place for tours was, of course, the Alamo, and we've got postcards of various types of buses and other transportation leaving the Alamo. But this is probably the most elegant transport, I guess, from the 1920s. The white sightseeing company, these tours generally left one in the morning and one in the afternoon and toured the city and went down to the missions. And those who could afford it could certainly ride in great comfort.
Now I find this a very fascinating card. Both of these cards I find fascinating. To me, the Alamo is not nearly as interesting as how people interact with the Alamo and have interacted with it over time. In the previous card, you show the posh tourist being taken in front with a limousine. And here you see the built environment around it. So I find these much more interesting than just a straight-on shot of the Alamo.
This is one that has implications right up to the present time. This is how the Alamo looked after Clara Driscoll got done with it. She wanted to save just the church and not the remains of the old Spanish mission convento that were nearby. So she got that torn down, and eventually even the second floor level here was taken off, and also the wall over by the Alamo. Now, these days you hear the state of Texas making these pious pronouncements about how they are going to very carefully restore the remains of the Long Barracks. And you look at this postcard and you can see there really wasn't much of the Long Barracks left. There was one front wall and one side wall, and that was about it. So the Long Barracks Museum that we go into now is really just a very small portion of the original shell of what had been the Spanish mission convento. Also, we get into San Antonio as a center for tourism for South Texas. We've got a few cards of the border and also some of the area in between. And I show this in part because of the message that was written on the back. Someone sent this card to relatives back east, and they wrote on it that the Texan cowboy is still in existence. They can be seen every day on their ranches. There is your cowboy on his ranch. San Antonio, when you got to settle in, had grocery stores. There were dozens of these small grocery stores before they consolidated into H-E-B's and Piggly Wiggly's. Dozens of small grocery stores like this scattered throughout the city. This one was on East Commerce Street. I mentioned earlier the extremes that seem to attract interest in postcards. We saw the grand homes of Monte Vista and Tobin Hill earlier. At the opposite end of the spectrum, visitors to San Antonio were fascinated with the creative homes of immigrants from Mexico who came up to Western San Antonio and used everything in their imagination to build a shelter for themselves. And this is one example of, as it says here, a Mexican thatched house. There's an icon at the lower left of this that indicates that this postcard was printed in London by Raphael Tuck, who advertised themselves as art publishers to His Majesty, or their Majesties, the King and Queen. So this is indicative of the sorts of postcards that that people, visitors to the city in particular, snapped up to send home.
Now let's stop here a minute.
Sure.
This postcard is pretty fraught. Someone who's buying this postcard, why are they buying it, and what message are they sending to the recipient? Is there pity here? Anthropological interest? Some sort of latent racism? What's going on?
Well, it's simply fascination at finding something like this within the borders of the United States. If you take a train to some safe city in the United States, all of a sudden it's like you're in a foreign country, just much like we see today, to a much lesser extent. And you want to show the folks back home how unusual San Antonio is and what strange things that you have seen. And so you would buy postcards like this to send home as curiosities. How many people have goats grazing in their front lawns while their kids are at play? It was very, very exotic to the visitors to the city. And of course, we've seen this at the opposite end of the spectrum. Here, this is the home of Harry Oppenheimer in Tobin Hill on East Elmira Street. He was in the shoe business apparently, and this is what shoe sales can do for you if you are a hard worker. Also, living in San Antonio, you had to deal with the periodic floods. In 1913, this traffic jam was photographed at the corner of St. Mary's and Travis Streets. That's a moving truck in the background, probably full of someone's household goods, and paused waiting for people to move on. Also, once you got oriented, you wanted to go out and have something to eat and go to your local pub. This is like something that you would see when you woke up in a bar and thought you had the DTs. This has got to be one of the most amazing environments that any restaurant in San Antonio had. The Horn Palace had was in various locations, and it was owned by one of San Antonio's really bad boys, a guy named Billy Kyleman. He had houses in the red light district. He lived on King William Street, ultimately in the Via Finale, the home that is now the museum. But he was a competitor with another collector, Albert Frederick, who had the Buckhorn Saloon. And Kyleman ended up selling the Horn Palace and its collection to the Buckhorn, and so you can see many of these heads today in the Buckhorn. Slightly newer note for those of you who remember Earl Abels at Hildebrand and Broadway. This is how Earl Abels looked inside in the 1950s. And,
I have a question about these two, Dad.
About which?
About this one and the prior one, both showing interior scenes. Is it accurate to say that when you're collecting postcards, it's harder to find interior scenes and more exciting when you do?
More exciting when you do what?
When you do find an interior scene instead of just a shot from the curb?
Well, yes, there are actually quite a few interior scenes. I mentioned the hotels. We have some great interior shots of some of the very lush rooms in the St. Anthony mezzanines with oriental rugs and grand restaurants inside the Menger. But they do add an intimacy that you just do not get from a straight postcard of the outside of a building. Also for entertainment, if you're down in the Hot Wells area, you cannot have missed Slinkard's ostrich farm. Mr. Slinkard raised ostriches for the plumes for ladies' hats, but he also had a lot of sightseers come in, and we've also got a postcard of someone actually riding on the back of an ostrich. I don't know if it's Mr. Slinkard or if he hired an extra to do it, but there it is. And nothing like the San Antonio Zoo for another great exotic sight to see when you're on vacation. When you've been in town, you go to church, you go to school. This is an unusual card in that it is a picture of the Second Baptist Church, as you'll note here, the Second Baptist Church for colored people. There are not many postcards of blacks in San Antonio, but this is a notable one. This is a structure that rose to the level of a site that other people were excited to see in town, and it's one that the church is not, this church does not stand. It was down near the Alamo Dome, but the congregation itself is still very active in a new location. This is Wetmore. This is the Wetmore School. And that you've got to think that this card was probably taken as a circulation promotion by the San Antonio Light. My guess is, and that's the fun about postcards, you can construct all these scenarios that may have happened, that may not have happened. But in this case, I'd guess that somebody from the Light drove out in their truck, got all the kids to pile in, stand outside for their picture, and then the Light probably gave the card to each of these kids as a souvenir and as a reason to remember the Light when it came time to subscribe to a newspaper when they grew up. West End, over by what's now called Woodlawn Lake, which was then West End, was a very upscale development in San Antonio in the early 20th century. The Lakeside Classical Institute was started by a teacher who defected from Peacock Academy, which is right next door. And it reflects the education that a lot of young men could get in San Antonio at that time, whether at TMI, San Antonio Academy, or a number of the other military schools that emphasized, as this card shows, military training for manly boys from good homes. This is who they targeted. This particular building, before it was a boys' school, was a girls' school. It was a Thomas School. This was attended by Catherine Ann Porter, the writer, who had been growing up on a ranch outside of Kyle and was sent to a boarding school in San Antonio to, I guess, learn how to be a proper lady. I don't think the situation was all that great for her, and I think she has written about it or referred to it from time to time, but this was its next incarnation.
The marketing pitch on that card is fascinating. I mean, today you think of military school, you think of sending problem kids there to hopefully turn around, but this is being pitched to manly boys from good homes.
Right.
It just strikes me as odd.
Well, there they are standing in great order. That is a great incentive to parents who have unruly children. You want to get your boy dressed up, clean, and participating with others in a very orderly and wholesome activity. And there you have them right there. The final section in the book is titled "Military City USA." Military City USA. It's not. It's the how San Antonio has pretty much been known since the beginning of time, really, back to the Spaniards. San Antonio has benefited from being so close to the Mexican border. In this case, economically, Fort Sam Houston in 1910 was the largest military post in the United States because of the risk of what was going on in Mexico, the revolution, spilling over the border and impacting the United States. In 1911, the largest military exercise yet held in the United States occurred at Fort Sam. It was a maneuver camp. Now, this picture was taken during that camp. You can see some of the tents in the background where regiments from National Guards all over the country stayed. It was also an opportunity to test out some of the technology that was later used in World War I. Military planes were won. Planes didn't always land safely. Douglas MacArthur of course, grew up in San Antonio, went to what became TMI, but he was never stationed in San Antonio except for one time when he was at the maneuver camp as an Army captain. A plane crashed near his tent and stopped just short of his tent. And the pilot who survived said he often wondered how world history would have been affected if his plane had not stopped just before Douglas MacArthur's tent. And
please, Dad, please tell me when that happened.
1911.
Well, tell me he exited the tent, stood up, and said, "I shall depart."
Right. That would have been a very wise thing to have done. I would have not taken the time to say it. I would have done it. But anyway, there is the maneuver camp. And this is what they were facing south of the border. The Mexican government, which had its problems with the people, tried to keep the lid on by intimidating people. There was a photographer in El Paso named Walter Horn who made some terrific photo postcards, including his most popular series of the Mexican Revolution, which was the Triple Execution. Some poor Mexican guys had been caught, they said, pilfering the commissary or something. So the government decided to make an example of them by standing them up at a railroad, old railroad station, and having a very public execution to show what would happen to these people. This is the first card from the series where you see the bullets probably going through the guy, or at least hitting the adobe wall behind him. We have the others in the book. The second one has victim number 2 standing up. This guy's on the ground. The next view has 2 down, 1 up, and then the last card shows the 4 down. But the intimidation didn't work very well. What it did do was it encouraged people to get out of Mexico quickly. Here is a line of Mexican immigrants, Mexican refugees, leaving the United States, leaving Mexico and entering the United States. Now look at this guy at the far right, and you will see the person who was leading the Mexicans into the United States, not keeping them out. It is a US soldier. They were taken to military camps. One was located in Marfa, where they were housed and processed and then allowed to freely migrate to other cities. And of course, we in San Antonio got maybe 100,000 immigrants like this to the city's great benefit in later years. But that's what happened there. There was some truth to the fear that the Mexican Revolution could spill into the United States. Pancho Villa, as a rebel, decided to cross the border and burn down part of Columbus, New Mexico, which he did, and that inspired the Pershing expedition. We rationalized this picture getting into the book by pointing out that the Pershing expedition was supplied from Fort Sam Houston. So all these couple thousand troops leave Fort Sam Houston to catch Pancho Villa. I've often thought, I love the caption on this, General Francisco Villa, the cause of it all. This could be a blaming postcard. I've got another postcard of the San Antonio flood the Fox Company put out. The Fox Company, which processed photos, had a picture of the flood and said, "This is the reason your photo was late." So this could be a genre of collecting of blaming postcards, which I have not pursued. But Pancho Villa, of course, got away. He didn't get caught, and pretty soon the U.S. lost interest in him because we had World War I. And with World War I, San Antonio's aviation was moved from Fort Sam Houston to Kelly Field. And here we have the beginnings of Kelly Field as one of the great aviation training centers in the United States. Also in aviation, we had the Stinson family, as in Stinson Field. This is a postcard of Catherine Stinson. This is a Japanese postcard. She did a flying tour of Japan in 1910 and was a subject of great fascination in Japan. There was a lot of interest in Japan from the United States in those days. I did this Zoom presentation once before, and I said, as I showed this card, I said, you know, it'd be great if somebody out there could translate the Japanese caption for me. Well, some viewer had a friend who was in the State Department in Tokyo. She sent the card to them and they translated it. And for those of you who do not know Japanese, that caption said, "Miss Stinson will fly now." I was very relieved that it was, in fact, Miss Stinson in the card. So in closing, let me get a little bit past the book. Another response I had in that show was someone asked the question, what postcards have I gotten since then that I would have included in the book? And the answer to that question is probably the scariest card that I've ever seen about San Antonio. This is a card that came out in 1916, and it's in German. And if you look at the caption at the bottom, it says, German, underneath the Alamo, German Texas Bazaar for the war relief of Germany, Austria, and their allies. And at the very top center of the card, there is a cross. It says Caritas, which is the German Red Cross. At the left, we have a picture of Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. At the right, we have a profile of Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria. These are the bad guys. And there are captions underneath, which through Google, you can translate fairly easily. So let me just read to you what these captions say. At the lower left, it says, "The hearts open, the pockets wide. Do not forget, if you are still German," and then at the right, "that also for you and your honor fights Austria's and Germany's army." The German war effort was getting actually considerable financial support from Germans in the United States. And you'll note the date of this card at the bottom is it was organized from the 11th to the 15th of October 1916 in San Antonio, Texas. This was about 4 months before the United States joined World War I against Germany and Austria. So this will explain pretty quickly how things shifted from the naming of Kaiser Wilhelmstrasse downtown to King William Street. The Germans pretty much had to retreat. You kind of wonder how many of them really still believed in the honor, their honor being fought for by Germany and Austria. But here it is. I have not looked up the dates to see, to get more specifics on this. Probably end up with names of people that I know and I would rather not associate with Germany. There are two San Antonio names at the bottom. At the bottom left, there is the name of a guy named Franz Strahan, who was a painter born in Vienna. And a couple of years, he must have gotten through okay, because a couple of years after the war, he founded what was known as the San Antonio School of Fine Painting. At the lower right is Ernst Rabe, who was one of the best known early photographers in San Antonio. He was born actually in Bohemia in 1874, and he apparently is the one who would have taken the picture of the Alamo that appears here. But in any event, that just shows you what postcards can illustrate. And
I find this one really fascinating, and I'm impressed that it survived. You would think that in the hurry to anglicize the name of the King William Street and the King William District, people would have been tossing out or burning these postcards. And this goes to a general question that was posed. Where do you find the cards in general? And this one in particular, had this been sent outside of San Antonio, and so it wasn't as perhaps as intimidating to hold on to?
This one had not been mailed. I got it on eBay. I don't know just where it, I don't remember where the dealer was located, but who knows? Somebody had tucked it away very carefully, and probably their grandchildren sold it in an estate sale, and that's how it came on. As to the questions on the postcards in general, about 20 years ago, I bought a large collection of postcards. The idea was that with Maverick Publishing, it's tough for authors to pay the usage fees that institutions charge for illustrations. But for all of the cards you've seen, they really can be adapted, used, cropped, changed, enlarged, reduced in size to make really good illustrations for books. So I saw them as a competitive draw for authors to Maverick Publishing. I would make them available at no charge to anybody who wanted to use them. In fact, in my book, American Venice, I used, I think it was like 78 postcards as illustrations. You never know it, because once they're cropped and changed, they don't look like postcards. They look like the historical documents, which they are. But that's how, and then after, to that collection, I've added through the years from various online auctions and shows and so on, the other cards. But it really can provide a very different look at the city than you would expect from just the idea of postcards.
I've got two follow-up questions to that. One, and Mom, you may want to close your ears, but how many postcards do you have? Well,
I don't know. I think it's somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000. What I've done, I haven't bothered counting them. I measured them by the inch, and that's what I came up with. A lot of them, though, are like at Brackenridge Park. You get pictures of the carriages in Brackenridge Park, and people always try to capture the essence of some great natural setting with a picture, which you really can't do. But you're under the moss and the trees and the Spanish oaks in a park, and you have an experience that you try to send to others. And so there are a lot of cards that are duplicates that overlap. But there are obviously many photo cards. Eastman Kodak developed a film negative that could be printed directly onto postcard stock. This is in the days before snapshots were really widely used. So a lot of people would take their own pictures, put them on postcard stocks, and send them out. Also, merchants would do the same, others would do the same thing. So you have not just color postcards, but also black and white photo postcards, which is one reason why postcards used as illustrations don't look like postcards. They really are not in that way.
So what would you like to find now? Either the type of card you know exists and has evaded you, or some sort of subject that you know is important and interesting in San Antonio, but for some reason you've never seen a card of.
Breweries. There are some great saloons. I've got some. I don't like to pay what those things cost. There was one card that I particularly regretted missing, which was of the Cole Brothers brewery on, I think it was on East Houston Street. And it was a picture of these old men sitting under the shelter drinking beer. And it was the Cole Brothers brewery. It was a photo postcard, and it sold for $400. And I figured out who it was. But I didn't get it. I was not the high. I was not.
Did you bid $390?
It's one of these things where you can't win. I know the guy is he's a veterinarian in Austin, and if he wants something, he is going to. I don't know what he could have bid. He could have put in $1,000, $2,000. I don't know what he did. You can't win against people like that. But generally, in categories, you have to special collectible categories like beer, breweries and things. You've got to be prepared to spend a lot if you really want to get the card, and I don't always think they're worth it.
So we've got time for plenty more questions. You can either send them.
I guess we can go off the
chat function, or even unmute yourself and ask directly.
Yeah, let me stop the screen sharing and go straight to the screen.
Someone asked a question by chat. What does Mom collect? I don't know if she's still on the screen. If so, we can let her
Well, here she comes. Here, well, you need to speak to your SA100 member. Let her sit here and she can tell you what she collects.
Well, being a longtime thrifter, I have many collections. And I started out, I guess, with egg beaters. I have all kinds of crazy egg beaters. I have a stack that is almost as tall as I am, of colanders, all kind of different colanders. But since Boysville Thrift Shop has closed, where I have been a volunteer for a number of years, my collection has remained static for these 6 months.
Oh, I have happy news for you, Mother. Yesterday, I picked up a flattened toad from the road, and that could add to your.
Oh, I wasn't going to bring that up. That started when Roddy Stinson years ago wrote a column in the Express about Ode to a Flattened Toad. And I'd see them on the street, and I thought, well, that is so interesting. And some of them are like in these amazing positions. And so I wouldn't pick up a fresh one. It had to be kind of dry. But I'd get them, and where I worked, I'd get them to laminate them. So they were like, and I have just a basket of those, if you must know.
I should point out that this is not a universal problem that the Fisher family has with collecting. William's younger brother, Maverick, does not collect anything. He's a reaction to all this.
They're always trying to get
We have another question for you, Dad. It's kind of dangerous. You can opt to not respond to part of it. What is the most you paid for a postcard? And the non-dangerous part is, how do you store them?
One of the great things about postcards is they don't take up a lot of space. If I were, your mother's colanders, I finally, in our place in the country, I finally got them in a plastic bag tucked behind a hot water heater where nobody can see them. They're not in the way or anything. The volume these things take up is difficult. A postcard, you put them in an archival sleeve and you put them in archival boxes and you can file them. They're the same size. And so you can categorize them very easily. So if you get onto something like a book or something, you can kind of deal them out like a deck of cards. The cost of postcards generally has been, they're going to be more difficult to find. Like anything else, the supply kind of tends to run out, and I think now the supply of many cards is running out, and so the price is going up. But generally, you can still get a good card for $4 or $5 a piece, bottom price, and sometimes they get more. I mentioned this one, that other one that went for $400. That's pretty high for something that, I don't know, can't eat it.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Well, I'm going to repeat a question I asked before and put it another way. So cards you'd like to have are brewery cards that you've seen but been blown out of the water in the bidding. What sort of San Antonio place or tradition or ethnic group or whatever is of interest, but you've never seen any photographs of or postcards of, and you would love to find?
Well, I'd like to see more African-American cards. I just got one actually that has Slovakian, I think it's a Czech language card, and I haven't quite been able to figure out where it is or what's going on, but I think there are some others like that that would be interesting to get. There are, I know there's some retail interiors out there that come up very seldom. In the book, I've got some from Joske's, interior retail departments of Joske's in the early 1900s. And I think there are some others. I saw once some of Pioneer flour mills that showed some of the mills and the operations inside, which I have never really seen. Actually, I just saw copies of those, so I haven't seen the actual cards.
So I will call attention to a link that Tori has just put up in the group chat for how to buy the card, the book. Your here's a copy of the book. It is available on Amazon. I imagine if you could figure out how to order it from Trinity Press itself, Trinity would make more money off it, but you know, a sale's a sale on Amazon and Time is lovely. Anything else you want to say in closing, Dad?
No, I just, actually, speaking of that, I just got an email from Trinity Press with a link on how to get it from Trinity Press, which I have emailed to Tori if she wants to figure out how to get that online to be able to get it locally. You know, they've had some issues. I'm so glad to be out of publishing because things have gotten so complicated, so concentrated that there's a big monolithic giant up in Nashville, Tennessee that seems to have a lock on distribution now, and it's difficult to go through them. But
the opposite of the monolithic giant is the Twig Bookshop, which of course
yes, of course, right. You have to get in your car and go there, but you can certainly have instant gratification once you go inside the door if you hurry and beat the line.
Louis,
Okay.
this has just been fabulous.
Well, thank you, Tori.
On behalf of everyone in SA100, you've been an incredible Zoom guinea pig. Your message is fantastic.
Well, I want to particularly thank you and also Ellen, who this morning, I was in total despair this morning. I thought, I'm never going to figure out how this thing works. And the two of you got me on the phone, and before long, I was swimming. It was a very good job. You're all, the SA100 is in good hands.
Well, you didn't need any water wings from us. You were a natural. And I just can't thank you enough. We need to send you a little certificate, you and Bill, to enjoy a lunch on us. And we'll do that shortly to thank you for giving your lunchtime to all of us and this great message. I did get the message up about the Trinity Press link. I hope everyone will add this wonderful book to their collections. And we really appreciate the time everyone spent with us. And we look forward to doing this again in September, October, and November. So, and please come back, Bill and Louis, and be our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jill, any closing thoughts?
No, thanks to to Ellen for furnishing coupons from the Green Restaurant Group for our guests each month.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
And so Cheryl Scully is visiting us next month. And this was fabulous, everybody. Louis, it's the very first time that I was able to see every image up close and hear every word.
Yeah.
So I think Zoom is a fabulous version.
This program in particular is very well suited for Zoom because of that. I had not realized what an advantage it would be, but it is.
It really works well. And you can't turn your head. We hear every word. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you all. Bye. Stay safe.
See y'all next month.
Bye-bye.
Do you want to say who the next speakers will be?
Cheryl Scully is in September. October is the National Association of Corporate Directors, NACD, and the two local co-directors are SA100 members, Susan McGee and Diane Sanchez, and they're bringing a program on getting on corporate boards. And then the following one, I just went blank. The following one, is Jenny Hsu, who leads the Brain Research Department at the Health Science Center and is a SIM scholar. And she will be talking about brain research.
She said UTSA.
UTSA, sorry. Thank you for the correction. Anyway, so some exciting programs coming up. And Tori, thank you and your committee again.
Oh.
Ellen, thank you for making this work.
You're welcome.
Yahoo, it worked.
This is the best Zoom call ever.
I'm so grateful it worked. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Safe, everybody.